This session is about how to manage teams, DevOps teams specifically. So IT management, I think, has really changed. There's work in the 21st century is already different. Technology work especially is different. And so this session is a way to help managers to prepare for the changes.
All right. Hi, good morning. Or good afternoon, I guess. Yeah, they jumped me in the airport. I was jet lagged, so I'm not really sure what I said. But today's talk is about how to know whether you're doing DevOps or not. The feedback okay? Can everybody hear me? All right. It's good? Okay. All right. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to know whether you're doing DevOps or not. I've been very, very lucky in my career. So I've been fortunate to work with a lot of amazing people. Most recently, I spent some time working at Chef with Jez Humble and Adam Jacob. I'm very grateful for that time. So I feel like I know just a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit, about what it takes to get to a place where you're running a continuous delivery pipeline. There's lots of different tooling, there's lots of ways to approach it, and I know there are a lot of really amazing and talented technical speakers here today. I'm not one of those, so I'm here to talk about what your team would look like, what your interactions would look like, and how you'd be able to judge the sort of effectiveness of a team or the quality of a team. So if you're here for a technical talk, you're probably in the wrong room. All right? So anyway, my name is Jeff Hackert. I'm the VP of Engineering for a food company in Los Angeles called Soylent. And I'm also an engineering and development coach for a number of companies, Chef, Absa Bank, SourceClear, among a few. If you have questions or comments or feedback or whatever and you want to reach out to me, you can catch me at either of those email addresses. And if you play League of Legends, you can find me in the chat channel at Space Monkey Pants. All right, hey, if swearing offends you, you have about 30 seconds to split. I am going to drop some F-bombs. That's going to be mostly what I do today. If I do nothing else, you'll remember me as the guy who just swore for 40 minutes. All right, so what the fuck is DevOps? There's a lot of questions about what it might mean, what it might be. I know there's a talk today that says you may never attain it, and that's probably true. I think it's also true, though, that we can put a loose definition around what we're trying to do. So the loosest definition I have that it feels accurate and meaningful to me is that DevOps is a union of culture, process, and tooling, right? So there are cultural changes that I think we're all aware of that must be present in order to cross organizational boundaries and do the kind of work that we're going to try to do. There are process issues that will arise if you've tried to do continuous integration or you're moving toward continuous delivery. You already know process is going to be a big gating issue for you. And then tooling. When is tooling not a part of the tech conversation? Seems like sometimes to me it's all of the tech conversation. So in order to be doing DevOps effectively, you need to have built a pipeline on the basis of some clear processes, and those processes, if they're going to be successful, need to be based on some underlying values or principles. Not too controversial. You probably heard a little bit of that in today's keynote, right? What do I mean by culture? Well, I think this is what I mean. My experience, I've been working in IT for like 30-something years. I'm 72. No, I'm not. Anyway, I'm 27, but I've been working in tech for quite a while. And here's what I know. The first 20 years of my experience, I would say, there was really no discussion about people first. There was a lot of conversations about technology, a lot of conversations about tooling. People were kind of incidental. It was not the friendliest of environments. I would include myself in that group. I worked with a lot of assholes. I probably was an asshole. And for a while, that was enough to get things done. But very, very quickly, I would say maybe a decade into my career, more and more collaboration became necessary in order to build software. Today, I would say it's nearly impossible to build effective software as an individual. That was not so true when I entered the field, but it feels to me to be definitely true now. And so I would echo what Kent says here. People matter more than programs. If you want to get to a continuous delivery environment, you are definitely going to have to learn to interact with your colleagues, and they with you. Just a quick, I can barely see you, but just a quick show of hands. Does this resonate for you? Like, is interaction just not a problem for you? Yeah, I can see some of you, right? Okay, so I'm going to talk a lot about effective communication. This is the take-home thing. This is the thing you need to know. I love Star Wars. I don't know if you remember this scene. This is right before Han Solo ran away and the moon crushed Chewbacca. He said, "It's the people, stupid." No, that didn't happen. All right. So what does an effective DevOps team look like? I think this is what it looks like. So identify structures, whatever those structures are in your organization, demand that they justify themselves, and when they can't, you have to dismantle them. So if you want to build a continuous delivery pipeline, you have to be able to cross organizational silos. Yeah? In order to do that, you have to question the validity of the silo. And when it cannot justify itself, you have to figure out a way to move through it or past it. The first thing that teams encounter, in my experience, is they encounter resistance from their neighbors, either upstream, downstream, or both. Right? And the reason for that is that silos create supervision. Does that make sense? So if you work in an organization that is heavily siloed, you know what I mean, right? If you could have a person sitting right next to you in the organization with whom you need to work in order to effect a change, but it's very unlikely that you can merely just turn to your colleague. In many organizations that are heavily, especially when they're heavily siloed, you have to make a request that goes upward through a chain of approval and then runs back down through a chain of approval to get to a place where you can interact with your colleague. In an effective DevOps environment, that is not going to work. Not because the authority or the other pieces of the silo aren't in themselves valuable, but the speed at which you'll have to work to resolve issues that arise is simply too quick for that process to be effective. Does that make sense? So the job, especially of IT managers, becomes one less one of delegation and more one of problem solving and removing blocks. Many of those blocks or impediments are organizational. So what's a poor CIO to do? Well, here are the key takeaways. So if you want to know whether you're doing the DevOps, right, these are the things to look for. Right? Are you having humane, kind interactions with your colleagues? Are you working to break down the silos between your organization? Do you know how to seek value over permission? This is a really hard one. In organizations where permission seeking is the norm, I think that you cannot in any way, you can't even get, I think, to continuous integration, really, because that's a blameful environment, right? So to correct, you need to allow your teams to identify value and move forward with execution. If they have to seek permission for everything they do, you won't be able to move at the speed that you need to move at. You have to make the work visible. So it doesn't matter what, there's lots of tools that can help you to do that. There's lots of processes. Kanban works very well, but there are others. The key is that invisible work will kill you. The invisible work in your system will rob you of your ability to execute effectively. Then the team has to understand the economics, the reasoning behind doing what they're doing. If the economic decision making is not transparent, it's really hard to set effective priorities, and it's definitely difficult for engineering teams to understand which thing they need to be focused on and why. It's not that people can't work without that information. It's just that they will make poor choices because they won't have enough information to make good ones. And then finally, give and receive feedback early and directly. This is both true for the individuals within the team, and should be the active result of your continuous delivery process. Does that make sense? You guys are so quiet. Like a thumbs up, a fuck you. Is there some other hand signal we could be using? Okay. All right. Anyway, okay. So how many managers in the room? Any? Some? One? Two? Okay. So this is really for you. You've probably spent some part of your career trying to create order. All that's probably about to change, right? So you should get out of the way in every way that you can. Many sort of IT managers have spent time in their career trying to cultivate status within the organization, some kind of power or authority, and that's awesome. Here's what I would do with that. I would give all of it away as quickly as you can. So you want to take the investment that you've made in your own career, and then you want to divest all of the power and authority that you've accrued to yourself and give it back to your team. This will allow your team to execute effectively. For many people, this is like a shock, right? Because what we're used to doing is delegating or deciding who should do what. I would say there's a lot of interactions around picking the work to be done, deciding which person gets to do it, resolving the issues or conflicts that arise as a result, collecting status. There's lots of things that we do as managers that are not super fucking helpful, honestly, right? And will definitely, again, slow the team down. So what you're looking for, if you're moving toward continuous delivery, is you're looking for the fastest path to customer feedback, right? You're making an economic bet that there's a feature that you can deliver that will cause users to respond favorably to your application. Ideally, this represents monetary value to you, right, in the form of revenue or profit or some other qualitative metric. Yep. So if we get in the way of that process, why move to continuous delivery? Why move to continuous anything? Maybe another way to think about this is if you have a recipe for cookies that taste like poop, and you sell them just to your neighbors, that's fine, right? Your neighbor's like, those are terrible. You make a limited batch, so who cares, right? But if you then ramp up a factory that produces millions of those cookies, you make a significant capital investment, a significant op investment in shipping those cookies, and they taste like crap. What happens to your business? Yeah. I don't know. It's nothing good, I don't think. So the key is to try to get yourself positioned in a place where what you're shipping has value as early as you can. Because if you ramp up the means of production, people are going to get that thing quicker. And if you can't make use of the feedback, you're just going to be shipping those shit cookies. All right, let's move on. You don't have a scale problem until you have a scale problem. So if folks are running around inside your organization asking, but does it scale, tell them to shut the fuck up. It does not matter until it matters. And when it matters, if you've created the right organization, you will adopt a practice, a policy, a process that will help you to scale. Almost all of the tools that are available to you in the sort of DevOps space are designed to help you scale when you need it. But you don't need to build all that shit on day one. Many people get confused, right? They get confused about what it means to be doing DevOps, especially managers, right? They read about it in the in-flight magazine on their trip to wherever, and then they go out and they buy tooling, because that's a thing that managers can do. But that tooling is not what you need, yeah? What you really need is you need feedback. So you need to get working code out into the hands of your customers as quickly as you can. If you invest early in trying to build this tooling, this is going to slow that process down. As a matter of fact, it may prevent you from doing it. I worked with a bank in Africa that really wanted to do this. This is a key initiative for them. And they did exactly what I'm describing to you. They invested in all the tooling. It took them almost 2 full years to stand up some basic test of the tooling. What happened in that 2 years is that their competition around them ate up more and more of the market share. So by the time that they were actually able to get an application out using the sort of the tools, technology, and dispositions that we're talking about, there was no market for them to capture. They were 2 years or more behind. You don't want that to happen. So don't worry about scale until your customers bite. When you find value, that's the time to pour more effort in. So I would invest in open source tooling. I would do the cheapest thing that you can at the quality level you can support. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Build quality first. It may seem like a contradiction here, but I don't think it is. You want to take certain basic steps to ensure that your team is focused on software quality. Quality I had this long conversation this morning about this. Quality in and of itself will not help you find your market fit. However, good software practices lead to easily maintainable code, easy to read code. It's really helpful to your team. As a software engineer, you want to feel confident working in the code base, and practices that support quality engineering support that goal. You want your engineers to make a lot of changes. The only way they can do that is if they feel confident to do it and they have practices that support it. So build quality first as a way of ensuring that you can move quickly without breaking things. Let me just put a caveat there. You're going to break a lot of stuff. It's kind of a lie to say you can move quickly and not break anything. It's more like this. You're going to be running in a crowded hallway where everyone has scissors. There's a couple of ways that we can deal with this, but for sure what we want to do is we want to make sure that everyone is practiced at basic first aid, right? And we don't want anything severe to happen. So we want to be as careful as we can, but we definitely want to move quickly. All right. I think this is the thing that, I don't know if you remember the scene. This was The Lord of the Rings. It was just before Frodo pushed Samwise into the lava because he'd broke the build. Gandalf grabbed his staff and yelled, "Improve constantly and forever." This was Deming, I believe. I think this is really just a good motto to hang on to, right? If you use this as guidance, as many in the manufacturing world have done, I think you'll be fine. The focus on decreasing costs is important, but don't make it the primary focus. Removing waste is what Deming is referring to here. So just think of any kind of waste, specifically code that goes unused. Not code that is written and deleted, that's actually fine, but code that is unused in your code base is a form of waste. Any kind of sort of sitting around, waiting to engage, those things are forms of waste, right? So those are the kinds of costs you want to decrease. It's not necessarily dollars or euros. It is really just those places in your system where you're not able to put resources to work to provide customer value. And then, yeah, that's fine, right? We all get that? Because agility is a thing. All right, we don't need to talk about that. We only had like 3 managers here, is that right? More, okay. This might be you, so check up. It bears just repeating very quickly. If you're a middle manager or a line manager in IT, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. First of all, you're probably in the least good position to help out technically. So you have two choices here. You either get out of the way or you decide that you're going to invest more. But you can't stay like frozen in the middle. So either become more technical or figure out ways that you can aid the development of the team and not get in the way. This is not because your opinions aren't important or your ideas aren't valid. There's probably a million good ideas that get generated everywhere every day. We just shouldn't be too precious about them. And as managers, what we want to do is we want to unlock the talent of our team. Right? It feels good, I know, to participate in technical conversations and to play a role in guiding the direction of the thing a team is building. But, you know, I would resist it if you can. Figure out ways to help, not constrain. All right. If you are doing some kind of Agile process, can I just see some hands? Who's doing some Agile? Nice, right? So you do retrospectives every 2 weeks. You make a lovely list of shit that you didn't really love about the last 2 weeks, right? And then you put that in the trash can. Yes, right? Or I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you put it in a safe. So you put it in somewhere where you might get back to it later. Here's what I would say. You need to pick a thing or two that are important, and you have to elevate them to the same level as feature development. If you cannot do that, don't lie to yourself. You're not in any way Agile. Not because you're not moving fast, or not because you didn't sign the manifesto on the website with those other 12 white dudes or whatever, but because you can't onboard change. Does that make sense? Like if you're doing a retrospective and you're not bringing the change into the work the team is doing, you can't actually onboard change. So you might be doing something else. You might be doing these very fast mini waterfall cycles that Scrum sometimes becomes. You might be using all the language and not doing the thing. So the fastest way that I know to check on the health of your Agile process is to see what you do with the content of your retrospectives. If you make use of it and you elevate what you learn into the next cycle, then gold star for you, you're doing amazing. If you don't, you are fucking it up and you should fix it quick. Sorry to be so blunt, but I'm only going to be here for like 10 more minutes maybe, and then I'm going to fly home. So I want you to remember these things because I think they're key. We can talk about ELSA, but that's a long conversation. So let's talk about this. One measure that managers love to use when they're giving status to people around them and above them is the amount of work you're doing. Look at all the things we're doing. Aren't we amazing? Stop doing that. Reduce the amount of work that you have in flight at any given time to clear economic priorities. Clear. And then finish those fucking things, right? Then you can take on the next. So I love jelly beans, you love jelly beans, right? But we don't eat the whole bag at once. Well, maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe that's a shitty metaphor. Anyway, here's what I would say. You have to stop starting and start finishing. The more that you do this, the faster you will become. If you're already doing a ton and you're not getting anything done, then you know what I mean. You have to think about the cost of delay a little bit. Is this too fast? Am I throwing too much stuff at you? Okay. You have to think about the cost of delay. So when you're prioritizing these things, there are two ways to think about the cost of delay. So one is there's $50,000 in additional revenue available to me right now if I go and act. Then the question you have to ask is, will that revenue be there in a month? Will it be there in 6 months? Will it be there in a year? If the answer is yes, that may not be your top priority, right? There may be things out there that that are going to scale off or decline if you don't grab them now. Those are the two prioritization things you need to know. What's the size of the prize? How long is that prize available to me? And what's the cost to grab it? Does it make sense? I'm assuming that these are not the questions that drive your current IT decision making. Are they? They're not, right? Yeah. The thing that the director of whatever the fuck wants you to do is probably very, very interesting. It's probably a great idea. Also, without any market testing, you have no fucking idea what's going on. And if you don't understand the economics of what they're suggesting, you should not do it. You shouldn't do it because every time that you do something that's of no value, you're missing an opportunity to get feedback from your actual market. If you explain this carefully and patiently to the director of whatever the fuck, they'll be glad that you took the time to explain it, and they'll probably stop bothering you. It may take a few times of explaining, though. Kubik Theory for Dummies. The more cars that are on the road at any given time, the slower we're all going to go. Which is just really going back to the rule we just talked about a second ago. Don't fill up your fucking Kanban board with 1,000 stories and tasks to show how amazing you are. Put the fewest fucking things in there with the highest value to show how amazing you are, right? And then talk about what you learned. Hopefully, you fail a bunch so that you get better at picking. The more you lose, the greater the chances of a successful win. Assuming you've done some market research. If you do the Eric Ries thing where you just fucking write software, throw it out there, and then see what happens, his success came from writing a book about how he failed. It did not come from eventually finding the market fit he was seeking. Anyway, that's a thing. Also, nothing's free. So if you have a team that is already maxed out, so if you go look at their board and they've already got a metric fuck ton of work in it, and you have people who are doing drive-bys asking them to do things, and that work is not visualized, then you are doing this. You are using randomness to try to solve a random problem. You are overloading your team, and you're believing that somehow there's free capacity in the system. This is a belief in infinite queues. For some of you may understand what I'm talking about. Right? There are no free queues. I don't know how long I should wait to make sure that sinks in. This is super important, again, for you managers, because, the director of whatever the fuck, sometimes something is really important, and he or she runs over, and they want you to do this thing, and they want it to happen right now. But they don't really want to displace any of the other important things. They just think that you're probably not working as hard as you could, and you could do one more thing easily. And that kind of thinking will kill you. It will definitely prevent you from getting this. Like, again, my premise is that you're all on this DevOps journey where you want to get a good product out into the market as quickly as you can, get feedback, and make it better. If you let the director of whatever the fuck stop you from doing that because he has a belief in this infinite queue, you're never going to get to the goal. And then you know what happens, right? Because we've all worked in IT for a while. That DevOps stuff will get a name, just like the Agile stuff got a name, just like whatever the methodology you were using 6 months ago gets a name. The belief becomes that you can't succeed inside an organization, and that's death, right? You're bleeding money now. Your runway is disappearing in front of you, and no one believes that anything can change. That is a fucked place to be, and it will prevent you from being successful with the DevOps. All right, so randomness is not a cure for randomness, so try to be clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and really question things that don't make sense, because you know what? When they don't make sense, they don't make sense. Stop shipping your org chart. This means if the work that teams are doing is based on functional silos, and they give you a roadmap that shows how they will improve their functional silo over the next 6 to 12 months, what they are telling you is that your customers really want something. For instance, your DBAs want to be better DBAs, right? So they're going to give you sorry, DBAs. They're going to give you a roadmap that shows how they can become better DBAs. Do your customers give a shit? They sure as fuck do not. They don't, right? However, DBAs care about becoming DBAs. If you allow this to happen, your roadmap will become basically a set of improved internal capabilities with no relationship to customer value. And that would be bad. Technical debt. The first person that says this to you this week, tell them it's a myth. Or, better yet, tell them that's a good thing. Right? Buy a house, buy a car, right? If you can do it with cash, great. But most people need credit in order to make that happen, yeah? And good things come as a result of acquiring a little bit of debt to get a house or to get a new car or to get a fancy wedding ring or whatever that thing is you want to do. A software engineer will come and tell you that debt is a terrible thing and everyone will die. In their version of the movie, we all die in a plane crash at the end. It's not true. So what is true is that we have to be thoughtful about software quality. That's real. But we shouldn't use this overloaded concept of debt as a negative thing to prevent us from running experiments, especially when we're looking to find customer value. It will hold you prisoner to a set of standards that maybe you don't even agree to. Anyway. Agility is the ability to change tactics, not strategy. So the director of whatever the fuck, when he comes over and he says, today we're selling ice cream. Yes, we were making software yesterday, but today we're selling ice cream. You just have to push him down the nearest elevator shaft, right? Agility means that you can change tactics toward your strategic goals quickly. Like a mountain goat climbs a mountain, right? You take a tentative step. If it won't support you, you try to move quickly so that you can be supported. Strategy is a very different thing. So I don't know, I've been in enough organizations who are trying to onboard these changes to know that we can get confused very easily. We shouldn't let the tail wag the dog, though. So the software that we build should be in aid of our strategic goals, and we should change tactics whenever they're not effective. That's a good measure of agility in software development. All right, it's the system stupid, so don't blame the people when your system is jacked up, right? When you see poor behavior or misalignment or whatever, what I want you to remember from this talk, besides all the times I said the F word, is that is most likely the system that is creating the behavior that you're seeing. Try not to personalize the dysfunction you see inside your organization. First, look to see where the system creates it. If you can solve that and the poor behavior remains, then it's clear what you need to do. But don't take that step as your first step. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm going to say yes. Change is hard. Don't be a dick about it. So if you want your teams to change or you want individuals to change, only ask for the types of change that you're willing to be present for. Right? What's a good way of describing this or explaining it? Yeah, so you quit smoking. I did a while back, and you might feel really good about that, and then you're walking down the street, and you see someone smoking, and you're like, hey, quit smoking. Okay, maybe that's generally good advice, but you're not going to hang around to see that person through, right? So in some way, that's being a dick. You might be right about the value of the change, but if you're not willing to walk through that change with them, then it could be bad advice. Maybe the smoking thing is not the best example there, but the thing that I want you to remember is that when you look for change within your organization, you need to be clear about what good looks like at the end of that change, and you need to be willing to walk through the process with your team. Otherwise, it's just kind of mean to push this idea that change is necessary down. That may be too long a concept for my last minute or two. What are you doing? Oh, is that two? Oh, okay. I was like, oh man, I'm getting flipped off. Okay, 2 minutes. All right. So value seeking or permission seeking. Yeah, you want one, you don't want the other. So if inside your organization you have to spend a lot of time seeking permission to create change, that's going to slow you down. You want to create a culture of value seeking. Where you see your team seeking value, as a manager, you definitely want to support them. Remove the blockers. Does that make sense? Don't worry about what impact that will have on your career. You'll be fine, I promise you. Meet people where they are. This is related to the change stuff we were talking about earlier. If you recognize there's a deficit in the team, you have to make a decision about how to solve for the deficit, not the person. So one of the things that has really hurt IT over the last 20 years is specialization that comes as the result of fear in the work environment. There's no fucking way that an engineer can know every single thing that can be known in our discipline. We can't know every language, we can't know every tool, it's not possible, and we shouldn't expect it. What we should do as managers is we should identify where a skill gap exists, and we should work to remediate it. Does that make sense? So you take your team where they are. The reason that we do agile process and software development as a team sport is because variation in knowledge exists. If it didn't exist, we wouldn't work this way. We would work a different way. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we shouldn't personalize the differences in knowledge across the team as a way of establishing who's awesome and who's not awesome. We should recognize that variation is the common, it is the water in which we move, or it's the air that we breathe. And then our job as a manager is to identify where that variation is hurting us, and then we want to fill in the knowledge that's missing, not judge the individual for not having it. Make sense? Okay. Have empathy for the people that are doing the work. If you're a manager, especially a non-technical manager, you have to develop some sense of empathy, right? At the minimum, if you don't understand how the work is done, drop all your opinions about how that work is done. Go to where the work is being done and learn about it. All right, and then if you do all those things, you win. Sound good? All right, then we're done. It's been lovely meeting all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to Lithuania. If you have any questions, you can catch me in the hall, or maybe there's a minute or two to answer.
Yes, of course. So thank you for great bunch of recommendations. And of course, I'm sure we have some questions from the audience. So go ahead.
Hello. I'd like you to elaborate, if possible, on the retrospective part, because that is where we quite often struggle as managers. You get that list, and it ends up in a trash can or at the bottom of a drawer. What's the right way to do it?
I think here's how I can answer this. You have to be able to elevate one or two of those items to the same level as the feature development work you're doing. So you have to factor the time that it takes to work through whatever issues are identified as part of the overall cost to deliver your software. What we tend to do is we compartmentalize the changes, the work that the team needs to do to improve, as being separate from the work that the team needs to do to release software. But they are actually connected. So we should treat them as being connected. So does that make sense? You made a... You're like, how the fuck are they connected?
Right,
Jeff?
so if you're working with Kanban, for example, or Scrum, you add it as a user story?
I would absolutely, if you can. Yeah, I would absolutely. People have different work styles, right? But you have to elevate it to the same level. On the teams that I directly manage, we take one or two items from each retrospective and we move them into our board. This way, they have their own type. So just get technical for a second. We use LeanKit. When we do an operational review of our Kanban practice, we can see the cycle time for the various card types, and we can see the impact both of like software decisions we make, but also the impact of decisions to do certain kinds of team improvement work. And that's actually important to know. Some kinds of work are complicated and can be a distraction or can result in an amount of time that we didn't foresee. And learning those lessons is as important to us as it is in terms of software development. So I want to learn all the same things from our Kaizen improvement that I want to learn from any other work that we do. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, good. Good.
Okay, we have time for a very short question, maybe.
I think I'm the problem.
Could you name one of the biggest fuck-ups that you have made that you are willing to share publicly and what you learned from it?
Can you be more specific? I fucked up this morning. Do you mean
in
mean
software
with the team?
development?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Yeah, I can. So the biggest is, are we filming this? I hope not. Okay, good. I'm just going to pretend we're not.
Here's the camera.
Oh, hi there. Oh, my mom's going to hear me say all those. No, I'm kidding. All right, so the biggest fuck up, I think. It was a big one. All right. So I put an engineer on an airplane to China. And I knew when I put him on the plane what he might do. And what I suspected that he would do is that he would write a shit ton of code and then get off the plane and push it onto the team. I kind of suspected that would happen. Anyway, I put him on the plane. It did happen. And when it happened, what I should have done is I should have thrown myself like in front of that process. I should have stopped it. It was like 3,000 lines of code, but it wasn't the amount of code that was the problem. It was the dependencies that that code introduced. What happened as a result of not intervening and driving a conversation there was it literally, the team melted down. So we lost half the engineers on that team. It happened slowly, but it was like an explosion in slow motion. Right? So from that initial pull request that contained 3,000 lines, right away, people were like, what the fuck you? Like, what? And I don't want to get into the details too deeply, but the dependencies that it contained were worse than the code changes. And it signed the team up for a lot of effort, a lot of cognitive load. But it also disempowered the rest of the members of that team. The person that made the change held a slightly elevated status, which also was a problem that I should have worked on more carefully. So people felt like they had to accept it and couldn't really push back. So what you had is a very silent but very aggressive response to his aggression. Like, to boil it down, the act of pushing 3,000 lines and a couple of big dependencies into that code base was definitely a fuck you. I figured it all out. You dorks have no idea what you're doing. Here. And then what the team did is they said, yeah, all right, we'll approve it. Didn't even read it. Because it's fucking 3,000 lines, right? Plus all of the dependencies. So again, it took several months, but we lost about half of the team as a result. Some of those engineers went into other teams. But the actual path, the development path for that branch effectively stopped. It probably took about 6 months to get that thing back on track again. That was a huge fucking mistake.